The Netherlands is a relatively small but prosperous country. When it comes to defense, it has no illusions of going at it alone, but it is a willing and capable contributor to Allied missions and collective defense with its compact but modern military. Sometimes stereotyped as the land of bicycles, windmills, and, well, tulips, and being a country that's now relatively distant from the possible front lines of potential future conflict, how is the Netherlands relevant in a defense context? We'll answer that question by looking at the following things. What does the Netherlands have to defend itself and to contribute to the defense of its allies? And what is the future of Dutch defense? This is Defense Index. If you find you like the content, please like and subscribe. Currently, the Netherlands has a population of around 18 million, with an area of almost 42,000 square kilometers, or over 16,000 square miles, and located at the northwestern corner of the European continent. Among the world's nearly 200 countries, it's ranked 69th in population and 131st in area. But the size of the Dutch economy is 17th in the world and 7th in Europe. Despite being a few hundred years removed from the so-called Dutch Golden Age of the 17th century, the Netherlands today is still a country that punches above its weight. The Netherlands is one of the 32 members of NATO and one of the 27 member states of the European Union, or the EU. We'll just touch on their more recent history to try to get a sense of the Netherlands' place and defense outlook within Europe and in the world. Into the 20th century, throughout the First World War, the warring parties observed the Netherlands' status as a neutral country. But during the Second World War, Nazi Germany, in May 1940, invaded neutral Netherlands. The Netherlands was partially liberated in 1944, but would be fully liberated only toward the last days of World War II in May 1945. In the years and decades that followed, the Netherlands would lose most of its overseas colonies to independence movements, including the Dutch East Indies, now of course known as Indonesia, and Suriname in South America. Today, officially known as the Kingdom of the Netherlands, it is composed of what it calls its 4 constituent countries, which include, apart from the Netherlands in Europe, the islands of Aruba, Curaçao, and Sint Maarten, all in the Caribbean. The Netherlands' bitter experience in the Second World War led it to abandon neutrality, and in 1949, the Netherlands became one of the 12 founding members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. The Dutch military was significantly built up during the Cold War. Near the end of that standoff, the Dutch Army had a corps of 3 mechanized divisions with around 900 tanks and 2,000 plus APCs, and an infantry brigade. The Dutch Air Force had bought 213 F-16s. The Dutch Navy had 22 frigates, 6 submarines, 15 minesweepers, among other vessels. The main task of the Netherlands and NATO in case of a hot war in Europe, assuming, of course, that there was no cataclysmic exchange of nuclear weapons that ended the world anyway, was for the Dutch Army and Air Force to reinforce other NATO allies in the North German Plain against Soviet and other Warsaw Pact forces. At sea, the Dutch Navy would help NATO control shipping lanes in the North Sea and the eastern part of the North Atlantic Ocean. In 1991, the collapse of the Soviet Union saw the end of the Cold War. In the late 1990s to early 2000s, the accession into NATO of former Warsaw Pact countries and a trio of ex-Soviet or Soviet-occupied republics pushed potentially hostile borders eastward away from the Netherlands. While the borders to previously communist East Germany were only a few hundred kilometers away, potentially hostile borders moved way eastward to well over 1,000 kilometers away. With a unified Germany and now NATO-aligned Poland and the Baltic states, all lying between the Netherlands and Russia and its ally Belarus, which would allow itself to be used as a staging ground in the 2022 full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Along with most other countries in Europe, the Netherlands massively cut its military with great enthusiasm, hoping to cash in on the so-called peace dividend. In the 1990s and 2000s, the Netherlands focused on contributing to international peacekeeping operations in places like Mozambique, Cambodia, and the former Yugoslavia. Following the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, the United States invoked for the first and to date only time, NATO's Article 5. The alliance's famous "an attack on one is an attack on all" provision. Dutch forces deployed in Afghanistan for several years, from 2002 to 2010. The Netherlands continued its involvement in international military operations in recent years, helping impose the no-fly zone over Libya, helped attack Islamic State forces in Iraq and Syria, became part of a UN mission in Mali, sent ships and boarding parties against pirates off the coast of Somalia, and supported efforts to protect commercial ships in the Red Sea from attacks by Houthi rebels in Yemen. Dutch fighter aircraft have also rotated in the Baltic air policing in NATO's northeastern flank. Contingents of Dutch ground forces have also been part of NATO Enhanced Forward Presence, or EFP, battle groups in the region. As for its role today, the Dutch would be expected to reinforce its NATO allies in the northeast, with the Baltic states and/or in Poland, in the high north in the Nordic states, with allies old and new, and even in the southeast, with allies along the Black Sea. The Netherlands would also be a crucial transit area for reinforcements from across the pond in the Channel, meaning American and British and Canadian forces, that would arrive and travel through the continent to reinforce NATO allies within Europe. Now, let's look at the Netherlands' armed forces to see what assets it has to defend itself, how it can contribute to the defense of its allies, and what changes it plans to make in the near future. The Royal Netherlands Army has 3 combat brigades. The 43rd Mechanized Brigade is the heavy infantry unit with 2 armored infantry battalions equipped with CV-90 tracked infantry fighting vehicles and a Leopard 2A6 tank battalion that includes 1 Dutch tank company and 2 German tank companies. More about this shortly, why the tank battalion, when we discuss Dutch-German military integration. The 13th Light Brigade is the medium infantry unit composed of 2 maneuver battalions, not the usual 3, and mounted on Boxer 8-wheeled armored vehicles. The 11th Air Assault Brigade is the light infantry unit with 3 battalions trained for helicopter and parachute operations. This brigade works closely with the Defense Helicopter Command, and when they work together, they are designated the 11th Air Maneuver Brigade, which can deploy some of their units anywhere in the world within 7 days, and the entire brigade within 20 days. The Royal Netherlands Army's Special Operations Unit is the Korps Commando Troepen, or the KCT, composed of 4 commando companies plus support units. There are also the Netherlands Marine Corps, the Corps Mariniers, the Naval Infantry Unit of the Royal Netherlands Navy. The Dutch Marines include 2 battalion-sized Marine combat groups. They can be deployed, quote, under all climatological and geographical circumstances, unquote. The Dutch Marines have a close relationship with the United Kingdom's Royal Marines. Since 1973, they have formed the UK-Netherlands Amphibious Force. The Marines have a special forces unit called the Netherlands Maritime Special Operations Forces, or NL-MARSOF, which includes frogmen, mountain leaders, and counter-terrorist units. Time and necessity heal most wounds, as the Netherlands and neighbor West Germany had become fast allies in NATO during the Cold War. Rivalries would be confined mainly to football. Post-Cold War, military ties between the Netherlands and a reunified Germany would only become closer. The 1st German Netherlands Corps was formed in 1995. Based in Münster, Germany, it is assigned to NATO, and at present, 1 GNC serves as a Corps headquarters for conducting joint, multinational operations. In recent years, as Dutch-German military ties have continued to deepen, all of the Dutch Army's 3 combat brigades have now been integrated into each of the German Army's 3 divisions. This allows the Dutch to take advantage of German division-level assets, while the German divisions are strengthened by the Dutch brigades. The Dutch government do have the final say if the Dutch units are to be deployed. But, once given, the brigades operate under German divisional command. In 2014, the Royal Netherlands Army's 11th Air Assault Brigade integrated with the German Army's Rapid Forces Division. In 2016, the 43rd Mechanized Brigade integrated with the 1st Panzer Division, the German Army's main armored force. This 43rd Mechanized Brigade currently includes the German Army's 414th Tank Battalion, which is composed of 2 German tank companies and 1 Dutch tank company. This battalion is often held up as a model of Dutch-German integration, even at a couple echelons below division. In 2023, the process was completed when the 13th Light Brigade integrated with the German 10th Panzer Division. On Germany's part, the German Navy's Sea Battalion, a naval infantry unit, has been integrated into the Netherlands Marine Corps, which is also a recognition of the latter's expertise. Germany's 61st Surface-to-Air Missile Group, a short-range air defense unit, has also been integrated with the Dutch Defense Ground-Based Air Defense Command. The Royal Netherlands Army is upgrading many of its combat vehicles, and these projects will be completed over the next few years. It has 149 CV-90 tracked armored vehicles, and 128 of these are infantry fighting vehicles undergoing a midlife update or MLU. This will give the CV-90 IFVs new turrets that retain the 35mm cannon, but adds a twin-tube Spike LR ATGM launcher, an Iron Fist LD active protection system, and newer sensors. There are 200 Boxer 8-wheeled vehicles, and some of these, likely enough to equip its 2 maneuver battalions, will be upgunned with the RCT-30, an unmanned turret that has a 30mm cannon and twin-tube ATGM launcher. The Dutch Army has 45 PZH-2000 tracked, self-propelled 155mm howitzers that will undergo an MLU in a joint project with Germany. 322 Fennec reconnaissance vehicles are also undergoing an MLU. The Dutch Marines have at their disposal 170 all-terrain articulated tracked carriers, including 74 BVS-10s and 96 upgraded BV-206s. Once upon a Cold War, the Dutch had 900-plus tanks, including 448 then cutting-edge Leopard 2s, and the rest lighter, older Leopard 1s. After the Cold War, driven mainly by budget cuts, the Dutch steadily cut their tank fleet until by 2011, they had no more tanks in service. A year after Russia annexed Crimea and Ukraine, the Dutch leased 18 Leopard 2A6 tanks from Germany. One of the big additions under the 2024 Defense White Paper is that the Netherlands will re-establish a full Dutch tank battalion. To this end, the Dutch will purchase 46 Leopard 2A8 tanks. There will be an option for 6 more, which would bring the total to 52. The tanks should be delivered over 2027 to 2030. The Netherlands plans to join Germany, Czechia, and Lithuania in a joint procurement initiative for the Leopard 2A8s, which are made by KNDS Deutschland. The planned new Dutch tank battalion is set to be operational by 2030. The Dutch Army is acquiring a long-range fires capability with the acquisition of 20 pulse multiple rocket launchers made by Israel's Elbit Systems. These can fire different rockets and missiles with a range from 35 kilometers or 22 miles up to 300 kilometers or 186 miles. 15 Mjolnir 120mm mortar systems mounted on CV-90s are being acquired to support maneuver units of the 43rd Mechanized Brigade. The Dutch Army's Joint Ground-Based Air Defense Command currently operates 3 Patriot surface-to-air missile batteries, which have a range of up to 160 kilometers for long-range air defense, along with 2 NASAMS medium-range batteries and 18 Stinger-equipped Fennecs for short range. The Netherlands will upgrade its medium-range and short-range air defense under a merged program that involves Norwegian company Kongsberg, which will provide the systems, and U.S. defense giant Raytheon, which will provide the missiles. For their medium-range air defense, or MRAD system, the Dutch are ordering 6 of the latest NASAM systems, which can fire AMRAAM-ER missiles that have a range of up to 50 kilometers. For their short-range air defense, or SHORAD system, the Netherlands will buy 4 of Kongsberg's new Nomads. These are all-in-one systems, with radar and launchers, for AIM-9X Sidewinder missiles, which have a range up to 15 kilometers, mounted on German firm FFG's ACS-V G5 tracked vehicles. As for unmanned ground vehicles, the 13th Light Brigade's Robotics and Autonomous Systems Cell operates 6 Themis robots, made by Estonian company Milrem Robotics. The 43rd Mechanized Brigade's new tank battalion that will be raised will also have an unmanned component that should contribute to combat power. The Dutch military will also take delivery of 1,185 12-ton Manticore medium tactical vehicles and 1,004 Caracal 4-ton light airborne assault vehicles. The Royal Netherlands Army also has the National Reserve Corps, or the NatRes, composed of 3,000 reservists. It is organized into 3 regional battalions, each assigned to one of the Dutch Army's 3 combat brigades. The NatRes charter does not allow them to be deployed abroad. Under the 2024 Defense White Paper, there will be a new system that seeks to recruit more reservists, who are seen as key for the realization of what it calls a scalable armed forces. And the Royal Marechaussee, or the KMAR, is a separate branch of the Ministry of Defense and is the Dutch constabulary or gendarmerie force. It includes 6,600 military personnel. The Royal Netherlands Air Force has ordered 52 F-35A strike fighters. As of 2024, they have received 40 of the 5th-generation combat aircraft. These stealthy aircraft replace old F-16s that have been phased out. U.S. defense giant Lockheed Martin will complete delivery of all 52 F-35 Lightning IIs by 2026. Following the 2024 Defense White Paper, it was announced that another 6 F-35s will be acquired, which would bring the Dutch F-35 total to 58. The Dutch Air Force is acquiring an air-launched deep strike capability with the purchase of 120 JASSM-ER missiles, also produced by Lockheed Martin. These can be fired by the F-35s. The Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile, extended range, can reach targets out to 1,000 kilometers or 600-plus miles. In a conflict scenario between NATO and, hypothetically, let's say Russia, Dutch F-35s flying over Allied Germany can fire these long-range cruise missiles that would put Russia's Kaliningrad exclave that fronts the Baltic Sea well within reach. If the Dutch F-35s can operate further east, over Allied Poland, JASSM-ER can reach targets just beyond the borders of NATO's Baltic states allies, the entirety of Russia-aligned Belarus, and western border regions of Russia. Up north, if F-35s can operate over new NATO ally Sweden, the naval bases of Russia's northern fleet in the Arctic could be targeted. The Dutch F-35s also took over a non-conventional role from the retired F-16s. The Netherlands is one of 7 NATO allies that make available dual-capable aircraft, or DCA, so named because they provide not only conventional air power, but also have the ability to deploy nuclear weapons, specifically U.S.-made B-61 gravity bombs, which remain in the custody of American forces, but are stored in some bases in Europe. A nuclear mission can only be undertaken after explicit approval by NATO's Nuclear Planning Group, which is chaired by the NATO Secretary General, and with authorization from the U.S. President and the U.K. Prime Minister. Moving on, the Dutch Air Force is also acquiring 5 C-390 Millennium twin-jet airlifters from Brazilian company Embraer to replace 4 long-serving C-130H Hercules transports. During the Cold War, the Netherlands once had 13 P-3C Orion long-range maritime patrol aircraft, but got rid of them in the early 2000s. Despite being a maritime nation, the Dutch have never replaced that lost long-range, fixed-wing maritime patrol capability, and to date, there are still no known plans to regain it. All of the Dutch military's helicopters are operated under the Defense Helicopter Command, an inter-service formation. There are 28 Apache attack helicopters, all of which are being upgraded to the latest AH-64E, or Apache Echo standard, known as the Apache Guardian in the U.S. Army. Delivery of the upgraded Apaches should be completed by 2025. There are 20 CH-47F Chinook transport helicopters. 14 were purchased new in 2016, and another 6 were former D models upgraded to the same F model configuration. There are 12 Cougar medium helicopters. These will be replaced with 12 of the Cougar's latest version, the Airbus H225M Caracol, starting in 2028. And there are 19 NH-90 maritime helicopters, all of which will undergo a midlife update starting in 2028. Following the 2024 Defense White Paper, it was announced that 6 more NH-90s will be acquired, bringing the fleet total to 25. As for unmanned aircraft systems, the Royal Netherlands Air Force operates an MQ-9 Reaper system, which consists of 4 unmanned aircraft, along with ground control equipment. Another Reaper system will be acquired, along with Hellfire missiles and laser-guided bombs that will turn the Reapers from surveillance platforms into hunter-killer systems. However, the Dutch military is already looking for a more survivable UAS than the Reaper, several of which have been shot down by Houthi rebels in Yemen. There seems to be a growing belief that the Reapers are better suited for a more permissive environment. It remains to be seen what this planned more survivable UAS will be, but the aim is for it to be able to, quote, collect and share important data deep in enemy territory, unquote. The Dutch military have other drones including catapult-launched integrators, hand-launched Ravens, and tiny 18-gram Black Hornets. The Dutch Navy has also selected the Airboxer small unmanned helicopter, made by Dutch company HiEye as its maritime UAV. FPV, or first-person view drones carrying explosive rounds, and grenade-dropping quadcopter drones have been massively used in the Russo-Ukrainian war and have had a big impact on the present and future of warfare. The 2024 Defense White Paper does not specifically refer to those types of small drones, but there is a plan to, quote, structurally introduce drones to more units, unquote. We'll have to see in the near future how this will be enacted. At this point, just a little request. If you want to see more content like this, please like and click on that subscribe button. It would really help Defense Index grow. Thanks. The current fleet of the Royal Netherlands Navy includes the following ships. There are 4 De Zeven Provinciën-class air defense and command frigates. These 6,000-ton ships entered service in the early 2000s and are the Dutch Navy's top-tier surface combatants. Their SMART-L radar was recently upgraded to the latest variant, and they will undergo other upgrades as well. They have a 40-cell Mark 41 vertical launch system, or VLS, with a load of 32 SM-2 and 32 ESSM. Another 8-cell module will be added to max it out to 48 cells and allow them to each carry 8 Tomahawk long-range cruise missiles, of which more later. There are also 2 surviving Carol Dorman-class, 3,300-ton multi-purpose or M frigates from the 1990s, of which one has been laid up due to a lack of crew, and both are due to be replaced. There are 3 Walrus-class submarines from the 1990s. One will be retired in a few years, and the last 2 of the 2,800-ton submarines will be upgraded, including with the ability to fire Tomahawks, and that pair will prowl the depths for another decade. There are 2 Rotterdam-class landing platform docks, or LPDs, that are 12,700 tons and 15,500 tons, and which entered service nearly a decade apart in 1998 and 2007, respectively. These LPDs can transport and land vehicles, troops, and cargo, and can carry helicopters. It has been reported that the older lead ship will be laid up, and their current crew retasked to operate one of the frigates instead. There's a joint support ship, or JSS, called the Carol Dorman, not to be confused with the older class of frigates. This large logistics vessel can resupply ships at sea, transport large amounts of cargo, and serve as a sea base for supporting operations on land. At 27,800 tons, the Carol Dorman JSS is the largest ship in the Dutch Navy. There are 4 Holland-class offshore patrol vessels, currently just over a decade old. These 3,750-ton lightly armed ships are used mainly for operations such as anti-smuggling and counter-drugs. There are 4 Alkmaar-class mine hunters of 1980s vintage that will be replaced soon, and there are 10 auxiliary vessels for various support roles. The Royal Netherlands Navy is undertaking a full-on renewal of its fleet. Over the next 15 years, this all-out effort will see the Dutch Navy replace nearly all of its ships, across most classes. In 2025, the Combat Support Ship, or CSS, a tanker that can refuel ships at sea, will enter service. This large 20,000-ton ship will be called the Den Helder, after where the Royal Netherlands Navy's main base is located. It will complement the Carol Doorman JSS, the only currently operating ship that will be retained after the Dutch Navy's comprehensive renewal is completed. From 2025 to 2030, the Netherlands will take delivery of 6 next-generation mine countermeasures vessels, called the Vlissingen class. At 2,800 tons, these are significantly larger than the 570-ton Alkmaar-class mine hunters that they will replace. The Vlissingen class are 6 mine countermeasures, motherships that can launch and recover uncrewed surface vessels, or USVs, which themselves can carry smaller autonomous underwater vehicles, or sensors. The ships can also deploy uncrewed underwater vehicles, or UUVs, as well as aerial drones. This is a joint program with Belgium, which will also acquire 6 of their own ships under the City-class designation. The French have also signed a partnership agreement that could lead toward them procuring their own 6 mine countermeasures vessels of this type. One of the Dutch Navy's most interesting projects is the Multifunctional Support Ship, or MSS, 2 of which are planned to enter service by 2027. The MSS will be low-manned surface vessels, with containerized weapons or sensor systems on the deck, and which will be controlled by a nearby mothership, such as one of the frigates. Dutch shipbuilder Damen will build the vessels, which are expected to displace 600 tons and be operated by an 8-man crew. Israel Aerospace Industries, or IAI, will provide the weapon systems, including Barak-ER, surface-to-air missiles which have a range of 150 kilometers, and Harop loitering munitions that have a flight endurance of up to several hours. Containerized electronic warfare systems are also planned. These vessels are planned to monitor areas in the North Sea. Conceivably, more multifunctional support ships, in addition to the initial 2, could be acquired if, or when, the innovative program proves itself. And maybe the MSS concept can later be scaled up for larger capacity, different weapons, and greater range. In what's a significant move, the Dutch Navy will acquire Tomahawk long-range cruise missiles for a naval deep strike capability. Ship-launched Tomahawks for the 4 air defense and command frigates are expected to be added over 2025 to 2029. A torpedo tube-launched variant for what would be the 2 surviving Walrus-class submarines is expected by 2029. The planned successor vessels of those ships will, of course, also be able to fire Tomahawks. The Netherlands will become only the 2nd country in Europe, after the UK, to operate Tomahawks, which are produced by U.S. defense giant Raytheon. The missiles have a range of 1,600 kilometers or 1,000 miles. They also have a 450-kilogram or 1,000-pound explosive warhead. The Tomahawks will be the Dutch military's longest-ranged missiles yet, and will allow Dutch Navy vessels to strike targets even while operating close to the Netherlands. Hypothetically, in case of an armed conflict between NATO and Russia, the Dutch Navy's air defense and command frigates and submarines lurking in the North Sea, fronting the Netherlands, could fire Tomahawks that could reach just beyond the territories of their allies in the Baltic states and Poland. Again, hypothetically, Dutch vessels just firing Tomahawks off the southern coast of Allied Norway could target naval bases of Russia's northern fleet in the Arctic. From 2026 to 2031, a new class of 8 auxiliary vessels, including 4 ocean-going and 4 coastal, will enter service. Based on a common ship design, these will be for roles such as hydrographic survey, Caribbean support, and training. They will replace the 10 old auxiliary vessels. In 2029 and 2031, the Royal Netherlands Navy will take delivery of the 2 ships it has ordered under the ASWF, or Anti-Submarine Warfare Frigate Program. These will replace the 2 surviving 1990s-era Carol Doorman-class M frigates. This is another joint ship acquisition project with Belgium, which has signed up for 2 of the ASW frigates. At this point, it should be noted that the navies of the Netherlands and Belgium have been operating together since 1996 under what's called the Admiralty Benelux, where they coordinate training, procurement, logistics, and maintenance. The commander of the Royal Netherlands Navy heads the Joint Command, and the commander of the naval component of the Belgian Armed Forces is the deputy. One of the big additions following the 2024 Defense White Paper is that 2 more ASW frigates will be procured, bringing the Dutch total to 4. The 2 additional ships should come in 2033 and later. Dutch shipbuilder Damen will produce the hulls in its shipyard in Romania, and the systems fitted out in the Netherlands. Aside from the usual weaponry and sensors expected of ASW frigates, the ships will carry uncrewed surface vessels equipped for anti-submarine operations. Now, how do you replace 2 large landing platform docks and 4 much smaller offshore patrol vessels with a single class of 6 new ships? It seems like a daunting task, but the Dutch do want to try. Starting in 2032, at a rate of a ship a year, the first of a new class of 6 amphibious transport ships should enter service. The Dutch Navy are moving away from having big ships near shore for amphibious operations. Heightened threats were also cited in the concept for the ship. It seems the Dutch Navy's planned amphibious transport ships will be lightly armed like the current OPVs. Outside their use as naval transports, they won't be equipped for naval warfare, but would be more suited for Coast Guard-type duties and counter-drugs operations in areas like the Dutch Caribbean. In the long term, one of the major programs of the Royal Netherlands Navy is the replacement of the current Walrus-class submarines with 4 new boats to be known as the Orca class. The first 2 submarines are contracted to be delivered by 2034, with the other 2 expected in the late 2030s. France's naval group was selected to build the submarines. These will be based on the Barracuda class, but won't be nuclear-powered like the French boats. Instead, the Dutch version will feature diesel-electric propulsion using lithium-ion batteries. The 4 Orca-class submarines will each displace around 3,300 tons. In the longer term, a next-generation class of ships called the Future Air Defender will replace the 4 De Zeven Provinciën-class air defense and command frigates as the Dutch Navy's top-tier surface combatants. The first ship is expected to enter service by 2034, and the 4th and last by 2041. The Netherlands has identified Dutch shipbuilder Damen to produce the vessels, and Thales Nederland to outfit the above-water systems. Since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, the Netherlands has provided significant aid to the Ukrainians, worth 2.6 billion euros in the first 2 years or so. In terms of value, the Netherlands has been the 5th largest donor to Ukraine. The Netherlands has further allocated 4 billion euros in aid to Ukraine over the 2024 to 2026 period. Indeed, Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine has caused a dramatic shift in the defense outlook of the European continent, including the Netherlands. In Defensie Nota 2024, or the 2024 Defense White Paper, a 60-plus page document issued by the Netherlands Ministry of Defense about its outlook and general plans, it states clearly that, quote, "We are renewing our focus on the protection and defense of our territory, and that of our allies in the event of armed conflict," unquote. Note how defending the Netherlands and its allies is stated and reiterated. See how national defense and collective allied defense are tied together as a singular primary task. Or the 2024 Defense White Paper is explicit on where the Defense Ministry believes the threats come from. Quote, "Long unthinkable, a large-scale military conflict between Russia and NATO is now a distinct possibility. NATO allies on the border with Russia, such as the Baltic states and Poland, continue to feel threatened by Russia. Finland and Sweden were neutral for many years, but have recently joined NATO. The Russian threat to NATO and EU countries is unlikely to diminish. NATO member states' armed forces are therefore investing in reinforcement and deterrence," unquote. Beyond what it sees as the Russian threat, It also warns, with regard to China, that, quote, the geopolitical rivalry between the United States and China, in particular, has repercussions for the rest of the world. Militarily, China is particularly active in the Indo-Pacific. Among other things, it is putting increasing pressure on Taiwan. This could lead to a major conflict between China and the U.S. The global consequences of such a conflict would also affect the Netherlands, unquote. The white paper also points to the dangers of so-called hybrid warfare. To quote, the Netherlands and its neighbors are feeling the effects of strategic rivalry and war in Europe through hybrid attacks. Cyber attacks and disinformation have a destabilizing effect on society. Attacks on vital infrastructure can disrupt daily life. It continues, quote, hybrid activities often take place in the gray zone between war and peace, but can also be a prelude to armed conflict, unquote. As is now widely known, NATO members had committed to spend the equivalent of at least 2% of their GDP on defense, as agreed in the alliance's summits, first in 2006 and again in 2014. As with many other NATO countries, though, Dutch defense spending fell well short. Between 2014 to 2023, Dutch defense spending was between 1.13 to 1.66% of GDP. But in early 2024, Dutch defense spending was forecast to hit 2.05% for the year 2024. So, finally, just in time for when Mark Rutte, the Netherlands Prime Minister between 2010 to 2023, takes over as NATO Secretary General starting in October 2024. This was in line with an alliance-wide trend where, in 2024, 23 out of 32 NATO members will be at 2% or more. Dutch defense spending will reach 24 billion euros. The current Dutch government has committed to continue meeting the 2% pledge. As for personnel, there are currently around 41,000 across the Dutch armed services. But the Dutch newspaper Telegraph reported in 2022 that there were 9,000 unfilled positions. In addressing the Dutch military's personnel shortfall issues, the 2024 Defense White Paper is wide-eyed about this, to quote, the defense organization must recruit, engage, and retain the right people in sufficient numbers, and then bring out the best in them. This is the biggest challenge facing defense today, which is why investing in people is paramount, unquote. To operationalize this, the white paper talks of creating a, quote, scalable armed forces, unquote, and is implementing a service model to realize that goal. What underpins is that, quote, the basic principle is that the armed forces must be able to adapt to threats as quickly as possible. This means scaling up quickly in the run-up to a conflict and scaling down in the post-conflict period, as defense does not necessarily need all of its people all of the time, unquote. So, how will they do this? The white paper again, quote, it is essential that reservists are fully integrated into the scalable armed forces. Scalable armed forces cannot be achieved without significantly increasing the number of reservists and making better use of their skills, unquote. To conclude, the Netherlands has a military that, like the country itself, is relatively small or compact, but is modern and well-equipped. It does not strive for mass, but it does for quality. As a NATO member, the Netherlands is also a country that ties its own defense with the defense of its allies. And the Netherlands is modernizing its military across many areas. The Dutch have historically punched above their weight, and it remains true today in defense. With its compact but capable armed forces and a strong drive and ability to contribute, plus the wherewithal to innovate, these factors make the Netherlands a modestly sized but solid part of collective European defense. So, that's it for now. If you want to see more content about defense issues, your help in spreading the word about this channel would be really appreciated. And yes, please, like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you and see you in the other videos here on Defense Index.